We did not win the costume contest, but it was fun. Okay. And it felt nearly effortless because we were running so slow with my friend. Just is not, she's, poor thing, is not progressed at all. So but we all stayed together and that was fun. But it's about a minute and a half slower per kilometer than what I would. So your family's down there in a race scenario. Yeah, it felt but really tall, eh?
Yeah, he started doing what Ava did a couple years ago.
And the winning of that wasn't gonna. I was gonna get a bottle of wine. I mean, I wouldn't win anyway. But that's the thing. Like, I actually thought I could win it. Maybe that would be disappointing. But yeah, it was fun. It was a fun run, and then there's a secret aid station where they water the wine.
Oh, I know.
And we got some nice wine. That's really tasty.
No, I pay for the house entirely.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, happy Monday to you, to our guests who are here, staff, council. I'd like to bring to order the City of Salmon Arm Development Planning Service Committee meeting of Monday, November the 4th. We have an agenda in front of us. Is there any additions to the agenda? I'll check with staff first. Staff, any additions?
None from staff, Your Worship.
And welcome back.
Thank you.
Our CEO, great to have you back. Let you know your staff did a fantastic job while you were away. Any additions from council? Seeing none, I'll ask for disclosure of interest. Councillors, do you have any disclosure of interest on any of the items? Okay, seeing none, we'll move right to reports. First one is 5.1 Official Community Plan Amendment Application number OCP 4000-41. It's 480 30th Street Southeast, and we have a zoning piece attached to it as well. I'll just check with the CAO. Is this motion for both the OCP and the zoning, or should we do one at a time?
It's one at a time, Your Worship.
All right, so the OCP first. Could I have a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor, please? Councillor Flynn, Councillor Cannon, thank you. I'll ask the Director of Development Services to explain this item for us.
Thank you, Worship. There's two applications here in one report. One is for an official community plan amendment and the other is for a rezoning for the property located at 480 30th Street Southeast. The property is presently vacant and it's owned by Shuswap Christian Education Society. They have been trying to sell that land for a number of years now. Directly to the north of the property is a city lot zoned R1, and it's used for overflow parking. And surrounding the property to the south and east are single-family residential lots from a relatively older subdivision. And then across 30th is some forested area, parkland, green space, part of the Shuswap Middle School. The proposed OCP amendment is to change the land use designation from low-density residential to neighborhood commercial to support a associated rezoning of the property from R1 single-family residential to C1 neighborhood commercial zone. There's a few C1 neighborhood commercial zones in the city, not many. The most recent one rezoned was the Tech Brew up just north of the middle school on this property. The OCP was changed for that to accommodate a high-tech commercial zone. There's a C1 neighborhood commercial zone out in Canoe where the Canoe store is. And there's a few other properties out there that are zoned C1 as well, small lots. And right across from the school district office is a C1 zone. It used to be the alarm company, and now it's a daycare. Teresa Horsting is the applicant, and earlier this year, she was operating a daycare on another property in the ALR. Had the correct zoning, she had a business license, but that transaction she had with the owner ceased, and she was looking desperately for other properties to build a daycare. You can see in her package that she initially proposed to use the city property to the north. She wanted to use that for parking. And staff, for a number of reasons, although we would not object to this land being used for parking informally, we do not support a formal easement or lease arrangement on this property for a number of reasons, mostly operational. The land is used for snow dump. It's used for overflow parking, and it's heavy trucks and equipment use this access here. There is a letdown on the southwest corner of the property into this. And recently, Teresa hired an architect, because if this is approved, these bylaws, then the next step would be a development permit application. And so starting with just a basic site plan, Mark Lamberton has done up a plan showing a building footprint. The lot is about almost half an acre in size. There's probably ample space on site for on-site parking. Staff support the proposed bylaws, and C1 zoning is a, for lack of a better word, it's a neat zone, and I think as Salmon Arm continues to grow, we're going to see more demand for C1 neighborhood commercial zoning throughout the residential areas of the city.
Great, thank you very much. I see Ms. Horsting's not here, but Mr. Lamberton is. Did you want to come and speak to us, Mark, about this property and your plans there?
At this point, no, I can just answer a question.
All right, if there's any questions. All right, I'll ask council, and councillors, I'll open it up to you to questions from either the director or to Mr. Lamberton. And this is on the OCP piece. I see no questions from council on this piece. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously. We'll move to report 5.2. This is a zoning amendment application. Same property, same owner. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor, please? Councillor Wallace-Richmond, Councillor Lindgren, thank you. Director of Development Services.
So, Your Worship, this is the associated rezoning bylaw proposal to rezone the property from R1 single family residential to C1 neighborhood commercial zone. It would come directly after the OCP amendment if it's approved. The OCP needs to be changed, and the OCP actually supports spot land use changes for neighborhood commercial. I should have mentioned that earlier, and it does support C1 zoning.
Thank you. Mr. Lamberton, did you wish to make any presentation to this piece, or just to answer questions if we have them? You're more than welcome.
Your Worship, Council, Mark Lamberton, 2751 25th Avenue Northeast here in Salmon Arm.
Great, welcome. I'm not sure Mark's mic is on.
I might not be close enough. There you go.
Oh, there we go.
I'm going to have to bend
Thank you.
over just a little bit. Yeah, as you can see, the initial request by the owner, or at least the inquiry into using the city property, was driven largely by her desire to keep as much open space on the property as possible. There's behind the philosophy of this particular daycare is the use of open space and outdoor space for the children. So that was her main motivator. But in discussions with city staff, it seemed like we better start exploring, even at this stage of the OCP amendment and rezoning, to look at how the site might be used, not assuming the use of that city property for parking. So that's why fairly last minute we came up with a site plan that looked like this, and this very preliminary, but just to demonstrate the general size of the building likely, and a potential option for access and parking. So that was the reason why this drawing came in a bit late, but we just wanted to start exploring how the site could be used. But I don't know if there's anything more I need to add at this point, but I can
Okay,
still answer
we have
questions.
a couple of councillors who've pressed their buttons, so we'll see if they have questions for you or for the director. Councillor Eliason.
Thanks. If we could show page 20 on my agenda under 15.3, the permitted uses in C1. Number 12 shows video store. Would you be opposed for that to be removed? Or would the applicant be opposed to having number 12 removed, which is video store? Also, in that same vein, number 6, which is neighborhood pub. And number 4, licensee retail store. From those, I don't want to tie our hands or the hands, but I think that at a neighborhood public hearing, they're supportive of a daycare facility for that property, or perhaps even a convenience store. But this is a sneaky way to get a pub or Blockbuster in there, and nobody wants a Blockbuster these days.
Buster spot,
Like, come on, man. So, like, what my question through you to the applicant or to the representative is, would the applicant be opposed to having those removed at a public hearing?
I don't suppose so. No, I can have that discussion with her, but I don't believe so. Given our conversations around this project, I don't think that would be.
Okay, when you blanket zone something, you throw a C1 at it, it is confusing, so I'm okay with it now, but at public hearing, I fully expect to have those changes made because it should probably make it easier, and I would recommend that the applicant and staff work through that before we actually get to that stage to remove those non-compatible uses next to the swimming pool. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Eliason. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for my knowledge, how many parking spots does a daycare have to have?
Your Worship,
Director of Development Services.
1 stall per 35 square meters of floor area.
Okay, so I know this isn't necessarily the site plan, but this meets, there's no variances for parking?
If there are variances for anything, that would come up with a development permit.
But, okay. I personally would have also supported some use of our parking for this. I think we need daycare that badly, but I'm glad you were able to work with staff and come up with it without using our parking. But I would have supported you using some of our parking for this. So I'm very much in favor. This is a great spot, and I'm not worried about a video store. I don't know that there's been one opened in North America lately, so I will support this wholeheartedly.
Your Worship, can I say something?
Yes, please.
If there is a desire for a covenant, I should probably get a motion on that.
Okay, so we'll just finish our discussion and then there may well be one. Other councillors wishing to speak to this item? Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Good morning. Mark, through you, Your Worship, I wondered if the applicant had an opportunity to speak with the neighborhood?
I don't believe she's done that yet. I think she's had some informal conversations, just while investigating like the potential purchase of the land,
Right.
which would be follow the subsequent rezoning and OCP amendment. So we've talked about that. I have recommended it, but there'll be conversations about that for sure by the time it goes to the next stage, which would be the development permit.
All right, great to hear. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond. Any other questions from councillors? I just have a couple of questions. First of all, support Councillor Eliason's suggestion for covenant on those items. I would also be interested in including number 2 as in that covenant, but I'm not sure if other councillors are in favor of that. I visited Mrs. Horsting's daycare, outdoor daycare that she had before, and I can see where she's trying to preserve the land because I know she wants her kids outdoors and she has Little Mountain and the school there, so I think the plan is a great plan. The place is a really great place. It's close to outdoor amenities. I think there's ample parking on the spot, but you can be sure that people may use our parking lot temporarily, and I think it's good not to have a written agreement, but just an informal agreement that they can do that. The thing about daycare is it's usually a drop-off place that lot is also used by Shishwap Middle School parents at times when things are crowded. So I'm very supportive of this proposal. I wouldn't be supportive of uses 2, 4, 6, and 12 on this particular site. Councillor Eliason.
Yeah, thanks. I'll make an amendment to restrict the covenant, including, or removing number 4, 6, and 12 just for fun, because Councillor Flynn was right. I don't support number 2 because I think neighborhood convenience stores are important, but I'm happy to see how council goes on it. Just so for now, the licensee retail, the video store, and the neighborhood pub.
Thank you, Councillor Eliason. Is there a second to that proposed motion? Councillor Flynn. Discussion on that motion. Councillor Eliason, did you wish to add to?
Yeah, just speaking to convenience stores, I think it would be neat or better for us to have small neighborhood convenience stores in Salmon Arm. I'd like to see one close to Five Corners. I'd like to see one close to the 20th and Lakeshore intersection that we're to build in the future. I'd like to see them more in neighborhoods where people don't have to drive as far to get their stuff. I see how well it works in Canoe. I see how well it works in other areas. So like a dépanneur for certain things if you needed gas. So I'd like to keep it in there for the possibility of maybe having convenience stores return to neighborhoods.
Thank you, Councillor Eliason. You may get to speak to that once this amendment's passed, because there might be another amendment coming. You never know. Would anyone else like to speak to this amendment on these uses? Okay, I'll call the question in. All those in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Is there any other discussion by council? If not, I will propose an amendment that we restrict the permitted use on this property to remove item number 2, convenience store. Is there anyone who would like to second that? Councillor Cannon, thank you. I'll just speak to it. I know there's arguments both ways for convenience stores in residential areas. Can we just bring up the map that kind of shows the surrounding properties? That's pretty good. So, a couple of things. First of all, Shishwap School is very close to that property. I've experienced running schools. Convenience stores being close by are not convenient to the school. In fact, they cause big problems. And so that's one of the reasons I think this particular location is not a good location for a convenience store. The other is, I think we're going to hear from residents in that area, and Councillor Eliason had talked about this previously, who are going to be happy to have a daycare there. I think that's a use that would be compatible with their houses. I don't think they're going to want a convenience store in their backyard, because convenience stores, although convenient, also cause people to gather, and this is right in the back of a residential area. The other thing I think is not so bad is if we're promoting active transportation and kids or people want to walk down to the convenience store, which is not very far from there, I think that's not a bad thing. The last is the traffic that convenience stores attract. And if you go to the site, while it would be fine for daycare because people are not coming and going all day, it's not a very safe spot to have a convenience store and have regular traffic in and out of that intersection. As you know, if you go through that area, especially during school ins or outs, it's very difficult to get through there. And adding something like a convenience store there would just add to that problem. Now, I know we're not talking about a convenience store today, but 10 or 15 years down the road, you just never know. So that's why I would like council to consider removing that item from the permitted uses in the zone. Councillor Flynn.
Just a question through you to staff. If we support not allowing a convenience store and 15 or 20 years down the road, it's determined that's a good location for a convenience store, that council of the day can remove that, can they? The covenant?
Director of Development Services.
Yes, council can remove it, and there'd have to be a public hearing.
Because video stores could make a comeback too, so.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Good point. Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would be in favor of this motion. I think that having a convenience store there is going to set kids up for going back and forth across 30th on a regular basis. Currently, Shuswap is a closed campus, and the kids are not supposed to leave, but there's an option on the table, I think, to turn this into one of 3 high schools in town. And having kids tearing back and forth across 30th, which is a pretty busy street, is kind of equivalent to having them going back and forth across the Trans-Canada. We're going to end up with another accident where a kid gets hit by a car. So I would be in favor of restricting this one.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. While I appreciate the value of a convenience store in a neighborhood, I think in the best interest of the project, which the intention is a daycare, and if it would be a significant change to the neighborhood, but a very much needed change. So in the interest of supporting what needs to be done to get a daycare in there, I too will vote for Your Worship's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, I'm going to vote in support of your motion for the exact same reasons Councillor Wallace-Richmond stated. I want to put this application and daycare opportunity in the best possible light for the community. And I think putting these 4 restrictions that we've talked about on usage will make it much easier to get this passed.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Any other speakers from council before I call a question on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment? Carried unanimously. We'll now consider the motion as amended. There's 2 amendments attached to the motion. The amendments restrict uses 2, 4, 6, and 12. Any further comments from council? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. I'll just check with the director. As this is an OCP amendment, what kind of timing would we be looking at? It's about a month down the road, is it not?
The next council meeting for first reading only would be considered by council for both bylaws. And then the following second council meeting in November would be second reading only. And then if that's passed, then third reading and public hearing would be in December.
So the 9th of December, we'd expect at 7 o'clock to have the OCP and zoning public hearings.
And with the covenant, that would extend final reading until the covenant's registered.
Okay, so important for Ms. Horsting to know the public hearing piece would be on the 9th, we're anticipating. Hey, thank you very much, Mr. Lamberton, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move forward then to item 5.3, zoning amendment application number 1159, 15th Street Southeast, R1 to R8. We have a proposed motion. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Wallace-Richmond, Councillor Lavery, thank you. Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, this is a proposal to rezone the lot addressed at 1540 15th Street Southeast from R1, single family residential, to R8, residential suite zone, to accommodate the construction of a single family dwelling with a suite contained in the dwelling. The applicant is Charles Boyer, who is here, and the property is right on the corner of 15th Street and 15th Avenue Southeast in Hillcrest. It's directly beside the Richmond House, which is on our heritage register. And this property was subdivided approximately 12 years ago.
Great, thank you very much, Director. Mr. Voyer, would you like to come and speak to us?
Well, I was just here to answer questions if you guys have any.
Sure, no troubles. We'll see if we can come up with some questions for you. Councillor Wallace-Richmond could ask them en français, perhaps. That would be unique. Can you come up with a question en français for Mr. Voyer? Any questions for the applicant or the director? Madame.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Bonjour, and thanks for being here. I just, same question I asked the previous applicant. Have you had an opportunity to speak to your neighbors?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant or for the director? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Voyer. Director of Development Services, the driveways onto this site, I know there's a rough draft that shows, I thought it showed a access off of both 15th Street and 15th Avenue. Is that how the city sees it, or did I look at the picture wrong?
Let me just go to page 28.
That's the one.
So there's a driveway shown on 15th Street and a driveway shown on 15th Avenue.
Okay, and that would be acceptable to the city?
It's really the city engineer's call on that, so.
Director of Engineering and Public Works?
It's allowable in circumstances, so it is acceptable.
Okay, for R8, I guess it makes sense. All right, thank you very much for that. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, all those in favor? Passes unanimously. So the public hearing for that one will be last meeting in November, is that right? Okay, let's just get the date. So our public hearing would be on Monday, November 25th at 7 p.m. You're most welcome to be there.
Okay. We
Thank-
can't make it on the 12th, or?
The bylaw would go for first and second reading on the 12th, the day after Remembrance Day on Tuesday. You don't necessarily have to attend that one. You can if you want. And then the public hearing would be the 25th of November at 7 p.m. I would suggest you attend that one.
Okay, thank
The legislation's such that we have to have a space in there of 2 weeks.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to item 5.4, zoning amendment application number 1160, Reed and Lawson, R1 to R8, 3341 20th Street Northeast. Have a proposed motion. Councillor Lassen, Councillor Flynn, thank you. Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, another application to rezone a property from R1 single family residential to R8 residential suite zone. For this proposal, the idea is to allow for a detached suite, and the property is located in the upper Lakeshore area. It's a double fronting lot on Lakeshore Road and 20th Street Northeast near the new Woodland Heights subdivision. It's an older property across the street from that newer subdivision. The property is definitely large enough for a detached suite if it's rezoned to R8. It is hooked across Lakeshore to this sliver. But the intent is not to develop on the sliver. Access is difficult from Lakeshore because it's very steep along here. The engineering report says no access from Lakeshore, so access would have to be from 20th Street Northeast, and we do have a basic site plan showing the existing house and the proposed detached suite location.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Is the applicant present? Okay, not today. All right, I'll open it up to councillors if they have any questions for staff on this application. Okay, can I just ask about access there? I know of course there's a driveway off of Upper Lakeshore to the house that's there presently. So would that driveway be used to access the detached suite as well, or would the detached suite have a separate entry?
Your Worship, I don't know the answer to that for 100%. There is an access right here, so quite possibly it could be used for the detached suite.
Okay. Do we permit a separate access for a detached suite on any property? Is that part of the bylaw?
Well, no, we would. Okay, it's kind of confusing because the construction of a detached suite would be exempt from frontage improvements, right?
Yes.
So if there were frontage improvements, there would have to be a high back curb all along the frontage there with only one access. But because it's exempt from frontage improvements, there will be no high back curb. So the bylaw, I'm not sure exactly what it says, but I think only one access is allowed.
Okay, I'll just check with Director of Engineering and Public Works.
That's correct. For each single-family lot, one access is allowed. And again, complicated because in the previous application, we allowed two. But it is on a corner lot. This one is in the mid-block.
Yeah, I see the different circumstances for the two as well. So it'll be one access here on this particular
I would suspect
spot.
that they would use the same access to access the suite.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned about a second access. Just when you look at the size of the frontage and across the street, there's accesses to every one of those much thinner properties. But if the bylaw says only one, I'm pretty sure based on the location, they're gonna come in off of that from their current driveway. But I personally wouldn't be concerned if they asked for a second one. But they're not right now, is what I gather.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Council, there's two items for information for you, items 6, 1, and 2, which are both Agricultural Land Commission responses to previous applications. 6.1, is there any comments from council on this application? Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. The first, I guess my first request actually, if through you to staff, is if we could get both of these notices referred to the next AAC meeting. I think it provides great feedback in terms of the process. Both of them have come through the AAC. Specifically to the first one in front of us, there's a lot of discussion at the AAC on this. The general majority of the decisions supported the idea of family transitioning on agricultural usage. This is one of the decisions that I personally have been waiting to hear back on, because the criteria is unclear about what the criteria are for necessary for agricultural use. And the feedback based on the decision on this particular application is that there was not sufficient, as I read it, there was not sufficient information on what actually the agricultural plan is, because this is not an active agricultural use at this stage, and some concerns that there wasn't enough information about the it's the daughter and son-in-law of what their use will be on the farm. So the decision still, in my view, leaves a lack of clarity, but it's one of the, as these things are being precipitated as we go forward, and there's another application as well, I believe, I'm not sure if it's been put on hold or not, but similar to this that's come in front of council. My question would be, through you, Your Worship, to staff, on page 39 of our agenda,
Yes, that's on the screen.
Under review of decisions by the chair, the last sentence, the commission therefore advises that you consider, this is to the applicant, the 60-day review period prior to acting upon this decision. So my question for my own clarification, Your Worship, through you to staff, is this a suggestion to the applicant that they wait 60 days to see if the chair redirects reconsideration, or is this that you have 60 days to apply for reconsideration?
Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, I don't know the answer to that.
I would maybe again, Your Worship, through you to staff, and I know staff has been on top of this one, but maybe we can find out from the applicant. I mean, if it's solely a matter of the applicant not having provided enough documentation, and I don't know what happened between them and the ALC, but to the ALC, to support a reconsideration, I'd certainly urge that we urge the applicant to reconsider or reapply. Maybe they have already, so through you, Your Worship, to staff, do we know if the applicant is considering reconsideration?
Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, the reason why I don't know the answer to that is because to me it's a contradictory paragraph.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense. But what I think is, I think the applicant has 60 days to appeal for a reconsideration.
Thank you for that, and I mean, that's the way I take it as well. Without speaking to the merits of a reapplication, I would certainly, Your Worship, ask if staff could, and maybe we already have, flag the applicant, and I think that they should, personally, I think that they should reconsider at a minimum so that we can start to narrow down the interpretation of the criteria. I will also suggest that we'll see further applications down the line for a second home for agricultural use, and it becomes very difficult, at least at the AAC part, to then say, okay, what's the determinant to say that this is a reasonable process for agricultural use. That still belongs to the AAC, but I'm suggesting that these are the sort of applications we're going to see more and more as we go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Lassen.
Thanks. I appreciate staff including these in our thing. I disagree with a lot of the things that Councillor Lavery has said, mostly because I don't feel that this is within our scope of work, and we shouldn't really try and encourage people or discourage people from trying to do more work when it's not our decision. I've said long at this table that the ALC has been re-entrenched. The Agricultural Land Commission has been funded. They have a new mandate, and questionable applications that aren't really supporting agriculture will not pass. I don't know if that has to be clear or if we have to reread that, but I'm not here to give too much hope to a commission that has its own mandate for our applicants. So secondary suites, secondary residence, secondary this, or potential uses, I don't want to give people false hope at this table. And I think that that was really clear in their mandate letter that came out last year. And that's just my thing. Like, it's great to see it, but they wouldn't allow the extra building for the church. They're not allowing this extra thing for the family. I don't expect them to allow a lot going forward. Maybe I'm totally wrong and misread my communications with the ALC, but that's where I'm going with it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lassen. Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that at UBCM I went on the agricultural tour, and Minister of Agriculture Lana Popham was there, and this topic came up, and Lana Popham stressed very strongly that second residences on ALC properties were going to be allowed, and we haven't seen that yet. And the people in the room argued that it wasn't coming down to their level, and so I hope that her statement is true and that this is just because there is no current agricultural happening on the property. That if they had already started their, I think it was a tree farm or something, and then applied, maybe they would have got a different answer.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Worship, for a second chance. I agree both with what Councillor Lyson said and what Councillor Lindgren said as well. In my view, the situation at this stage, and speaking for the AEC as we have stuff coming in front of us, is what lens do we use to interpret what essentially the ALC is saying is that an additional residence for farm help has to be necessary. What metrics do we use to make that? So at this stage right now, and I think speaking for the AAC, they think, okay, reasonable idea, and let's send it up to the ALC. I fully support that. But I do think that we're at a stage where it's unclear still the exact criteria of what a successful agricultural plan would be from the ALC. That's where we are right now. I was not, my suggestion about personally urging the applicants to apply for reconsideration is as much about clarity for our table as it is for their application as well. So there's going to be more to come. We'll build up a body of decision making and evidence on that, but it really is the hinging point that I'm anticipating that the AAC and then this table will see in the next while.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lavery. Could I just ask the Director of Development Services, did this application go in prior to the city having to forward applications? Was it put forward by the actual owners of the property, or did the city put forward this one? Because I know the legislation's changed.
Your worship, the city authorized us to go to the ALC, along with 2 others, so we should be getting comments back, decisions back on 2 other ones very similar to this.
Okay. The other question is the appeal on the second one. Well, I won't talk about the second one yet. We'll go to that one in a sec. In response to what councillors have been saying, and I understand the difficult position the AAC is in, it seems to me that the answers on page 43, the input on page 43 to the applicants is fairly clear. If we could just go to that on page 43. Besides from saying, as Councillor Eliason had mentioned, what their mandate is at the start of the letter, which they always put on, which are very clear. Number 13, if you read down part way, says when considering permitting an additional residence in advance of an establishing a farm operation, the panel must have some assurance that the operation will in fact be established. And that if established, the type and level of agriculture would require the additional resident to accommodate additional farm workers. So they want to know that. And then number 14 says, I won't read the whole thing, but the second sentence says, the panel reviewed the application and found that there was no description as a proposed expansion, and therefore would not assess whether an additional residence for farm help is necessary. So those are important pieces I'm sure that the applicant is going to review, and if they want to appeal, would have to answer those, because that's what the ALC is saying to them. To the director, if they choose to appeal, does the city have any involvement in that? Like, does the city have to authorize the appeal?
No, Your Worship.
Thank heavens. Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, you know, I think the entrenchment that Councillor Eliason spoke to is pretty clear. And as much as the minister said that that's not what's happening, I think the reality is I think we should be telling people when they come how little success anybody has had. And at least, not saying don't apply, but at least help people understand how unlikely they are to get any approval. And I find it extremely frustrating, and so do hundreds of farmers who protested 2 weeks ago at the legislature. And it's happening all over the province. You just have to pick up the newspaper and see. I don't think there's going to be very many yeses in the next number of years for any alternative use of anything, and I think we need to tell people that.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Eliason.
Yeah, thanks. And one of the main reasons why they've gone to this model wasn't just to this or that. It's to make farmland or potential farmland more affordable for people to buy so people can farm. That's the rationale in their explanations of other things. So the 5,000 square foot max, the non-secondary residential for purchasing, like they're trying to make farmland affordable to buy. And so this is one of those steps that says, hey, no, I want a young farmer to be able to come in and do this. And so they are re-entrenched, and I don't know if it's for us to tell people, but people should be getting the message. I think we at this table have certainly received it.
Thank you, Councillor Eliason. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks for the third and final time for me, Your Worship. And as you've pointed out on page 43, so this decision does give some criteria about their thinking to our table and the AAC, and that's to make sure that the discussion with applicants at the AAC is, what is your proposed expansion plan? How clear are you? Be sure to delineate how that whoever's going to live in that second residence will contribute to the proposed business plan, agricultural plan of the property there. We've been waiting for something like this. For the applicants, it's probably what they didn't want to hear, but we now have the start of clarity, and again, I talk of a body of evidence, and we're going to be getting more and more of that. This is, as the Director of Planning indicated, we have a couple other applications online. We've been waiting for these, and I think that as we get them, we'll start to formulate at least what the thinking of the panel is.
Great, thank you, Councillor Lavery. Okay, is there any further discussion on item 6.1? Any discussion on item 6.2, which was ALC resolution number 7 regarding the church property at North Broadview? Okay, I see no further discussion. I think we had good discussion on those items. Thank you. We have a motion for adjournment.
Moved by Councillor Lindgren, seconded by Councillor Eliason, that the Development and Planning Services Committee meeting of November 4th, 2019 be adjourned.
All those in favor? Thank you. We'll meet just for a few minutes, Council, in room 100.